Okay, tonight we're on the third of several basic family tree classes for beginners and for some of us that aren't beginners. And this one's on mastering sourcing, hints, and source linker. I tried throwing all the sourcing things together because I know that they cause a lot of problems for a lot of us. So what exactly are we going to cover tonight? We're going to talk about the what and why of sources, and then the three categories of sources that FamilySearch has. Talk about the parts of the source, and then talk about creating a source yourself. Duplicate sources, because that's always a big issue. Hints, what are they and where can you find them? And we'll talk about using the source linker, and we'll use a couple of examples where things are a little complex because it's not always real apparent exactly how you're to use it. And then one thing I think that's very important is we'll talk about not a match on sources and using that with caution. Okay, so what is a source? Source is a historical record or a transcription of that record or some kind of a compiled record with historical relevance. Examples could be a picture of something that's historical. It could be a journal. It could be a Bible entry. It could be vital records. It could be a book or manuscript. All those things, there's many different kinds of things that are actually sources. The importance to them are that they're critical to the genealogical process because they provide us with the documentation that we need and helps us to discover things about our ancestors. In Family Tree, you can attach sources to people. You can attach them to their different vital records, their birth, death, that sort of thing. You can attach them to couple relationships and parent-child relationships. And now you can even attach sources to other facts like residency, military, and things like that. Those are actually available now to have sources attached to them. Okay, sources provide many benefits. And these are kind of general statements. Sometimes they're actually the opposite can occur. But in general, they make it easier for users to work together in family trees because the sources can settle or prevent disputes, hopefully. They add richness to the tree. Information about your ancestors on a record can increase your awareness of that the ancestors are real people and that you really are connected to them. They can demonstrate the accuracy of the information in tree. Occasionally, a source might be inaccurate itself, and that would cause the opposite. But in general, they demonstrate the accuracy of the tree. They can help you evaluate conflicting information. And when you find conflicting information, such as two different birth dates for the same person's, sources can often help you to determine which one's most likely to contain the correct information. And they acknowledge the work that's done by others. And so this gives you a chance to have a place where you can show other people who have put a lot of effort into things and maybe produced a book or something like that. And you can source that book to recognize and acknowledge the work they did. Now, this is a blank source form from FamilySearch. They call it sources. If you went to some of the books that are out there on sourcing and genealogy, you'd find that FamilySearch's sourcing system's kind of a dummied down version of what professionals would prefer. But it's good enough in our case because it covers the bulk of the things that we need to show on a source. The first thing is there's a place for the date. Now that can be a little bit tricky. If it's a death certificate, the logical thing for the date would probably be the person's death date. The next closest might be the date that the document was created. But in that case, the dead person's death date is probably the best date to use for the date. Sometimes if it's like a book, instead of putting a date from the person's life, you might consider putting the date the book was published as the date, because that kind of tells people, how old the sourcing for this is. Then there's a place for the source title. And one thing I would recommend is that source title should usually start with the person's name, unless it's for a whole group of people, like a family, let's say a census record. Then you could say it's the John Jones family on the 1850 census, and then go with the rest of the name of the source group that it came from, or whatever you want. But I try to put names at the front because that tends to help track things and helps to show people that all these sources in this list are all for this particular person. Okay, then there's a place for web page. Now, that won't always be used because you don't always have a source that comes off of the internet or from a memory, and we'll be talking about that, to where there's an actual web page link. So it is possible you would leave that blank. But you would definitely want to fill in the next section where it talks about where this record is found. And this would include the location of the record, its title, its author, when it was created, those things that you would normally think of in a citation for a record. And then the last one is one that a lot of people don't use that I think is very important. And as a service to others, I try to provide genealogical information from the source in the notes area. This is where I'll copy, if nothing else, copy the transcription that was used with this online source that gave the basic information that's found in this document that I used to determine this record went to this person. I would copy and paste that information into here, or I'd make a transcription of a will or something like that, but I wouldn't leave it blank. This is really important if you're doing a source from, say, Ancestry, where other people might not have access to Ancestry. It's really important that you leave a transcription in there of what was on that record for them, because otherwise they're not going to have a clue what was really on that record. Okay, so those are the parts of the source. Sources have been categorized into three main types of sources according to FamilySearch. The first one are the sources that came from FamilySearch itself. These are actual record sources or other things that were found in the catalog or under books or, things like that. And so you're creating these while you're in FamilySearch, and FamilySearch then will fill in most of the boxes. All you need to do is just kind of skim them to see that they provided good information. Now, they won't fill in notes. So if you feel like it needs some more information about what was found in that record, go ahead and fill in the notes section. But most of it will actually already be filled in for you, majority anyway. And they are all marked with the little FamilySearch tree icon. Now, a second type of source, and it's not used an awful lot, but it could be, is a source made from a memory. You might have attached to FamilySearch, say, a page out of the Bible, your family Bible. And so you could create a source and link that source to the memory in your memories of that Bible so that people could see it, and you'd actually provide the link for that memory in FamilySearch. Now, the catch with this one is you have to fill in all the boxes. You're going to have to provide everything: the date, the title, the citation, and the notes that you want to put in there. But you can make a source like that, and I've done several. Those are made, when they're made, they show you that little funky icon that is a rectangle. It looks like it's got a couple of triangles in it. Then the third type of source is for anything that's created from outside FamilySearch. And so it's going to show a world symbol, meaning it came from out in the world somewhere. And again, these are sources that you're probably going to have to make for yourself. You're going to have to make them up from scratch and fill in the boxes. The one exception is there is a neat little program called RecordSeek that can create a source, and we'll be talking about RecordSeek in a few minutes. Okay, well, these symbols are used to help you identify the origins of the sources. And so you'll always see these in front of every source so that you get a feel for where it's actually coming from without having to read the details. Okay, for creating a source yourself, I'll just give you an example. I have a book that I wrote on the Mummert family, and there's a George Mummert in that book that does not have a reference to himself in that book. So I created a source. I actually have a dummy source that I copied because it has the date, the title, and the web page, and it has the citation information all filled in. And so I create a duplicate, a copy, and then I just erase copy out of the title, and then I can use this source, in this case for George Mummert. What I did do is I went to the page where he is found, and I copy and pasted the information about him out of the book. And there's quite a bit more. You can see the slider can slide down more. So the notes are really the most important part of this. This is a book that's in the FamilySearch book collection. And so that's why there's a link here. And that link takes you into the book collections at FamilySearch. And I put his name and birth and death date, since there's more than one George Mummert, and provided the title of the book. And I said he's in that book. The date was the date the book was published, not 1813 or 1896, just the date the book was published. Okay, so I created that. Now, how am I going to source this thing to George? Well, I go to George and I go to his sources, and then on his source page, it says add a source. So I click on that and I choose attach from the source box because I made this source and it's sitting over in the source box. So now all I have to do is click attach from source. I go over to the source box, which is on the right-hand side here. And the nice thing about the source box, if you haven't changed the filtering, it'll put the most recent sources at the very top of the list. So I just want the top one because that's the one I just created. And so that's the source I want to attach to George. So all I have to do is click attach over here. And I get a little box that says, you know, this is the source, George Mummert, found in the descent of Dietrich Mummert, and so on. Attach it to that person, and then I'm to give a reason. So I say this is a researched record of his life with sources showing, and then I can click attach. And that's all I have to do, and it's done. Now, we talked about making a source with RecordSeek. There's been some issues. It's funny. I wrote this, everything was fine. And then last week, I discovered that RecordSeek was having some issues. And it's not working too well from a lot of browsers. And so I was really getting worried about what to do here. So everything I've talked about in it was talking about using Chrome. Right now, at this moment, it's not working in Chrome. Something's been done in Chrome that has screwed it up. But it will work over in Firefox. And I was able to download Firefox, which I had quit using a long time ago. I downloaded Firefox today, and then I did as it says here. The only thing you have to do to install this product, which is a browser extension, is to go to that page, recordseek.com. There's a little green box on that page, and you drag that and drop it in the favorites bar, and it will then activate it. So I did that over on Firefox, and it works just fine. So right now I can say you can do it if you go switch over and use Firefox for your browser. And hopefully within a short period of time here, they'll work out whatever the issue is with Chrome. But they're having trouble with Chrome, and I believe it's Edge also. So to use it, you just click on the extension manager icon for RecordSeek, and then on RecordSeek itself, and off you go. So what I want to do is create a source over at Ancestry, and I will want to put it at FamilySearch. So I go up to the little extension manager icon. If I'm using Chrome, it's this funky little jigsaw puzzle piece. I click on that and I get this drop down, which is labeled extensions. And I've installed RecordSeek. It's down here. So I just click on RecordSeek. And remember, this is to use with records that are outside FamilySearch that you want to source into FamilySearch. You could actually source things outside of Ancestry into Ancestry too, but we're not talking about that today. We're just talking about how we're going to get a record into FamilySearch. Okay, and then I had my little message. Originally, I had put it up there that it wasn't working, but I did find out later today that it works on Firefox. Okay, so using RecordSeek, let's show you an example. In FamilySearch, I have Thomas Sands, who died in Pennsylvania after they started doing death certificates. That's great, except FamilySearch doesn't have the death certificates, but Ancestry does. So here's the things I got to do to use RecordSeek. I go to Thomas Elwood Sands' page at FamilySearch, and I copy his ID. I do that because I don't want to have to go searching for him. A little later on, you'll see why. Then I click on Ancestry under Search Records, because I happen to know there's going to be a death certificate over there. There should be. And when I click on Ancestry and I start looking at the results, the very first one was what I wanted. Pennsylvania, U.S. death certificates, 1906 to 1969, Thomas Elwood Sands. See, I knew his death date and I knew his birth date, but I had no source for his death. Thought that's kind of dumb. We need to put some sources in there. So I need this. So I'm going to click on the title. And that will take me to the transcription page. We're not going to source the image. We're going to source the transcription page, because on that page, even though you don't see it here, it's going to have a link to the image. But we want this transcription page. And what I'm going to do is highlight what was transcribed. I'm not going to copy it. I'm just going to highlight it. Everything I highlight is going to be put into the notes part of the source at FamilySearch, and I'm not going to have to type it in. This is really a nice little program. Okay, so I highlight what I want, and then I click on the RecordSeek icon by going up there to the little jigsaw puzzle piece, click on RecordSeek, and up will pop a little screen that wants to know, where are we going here? Create a source, and it gives me the choices of FamilySearch or Ancestry. And so I'm going to click on FamilySearch, and then it will actually, if I haven't used it yet, it will make me sign in. And then it'll bring me up this source that they're filling in for me. And notice they've filled in all the boxes. This is what makes this so nice. I usually have to proofread and make sure they've done things right, like make sure I put Thomas Elwood Sands' name in here. The source will be okay. And where the record is found usually is okay. And then this describe the record, which is the notes. Sometimes I'll go through and just, click and hit enter and make a nice list of all this information, and usually erase source created by record seek. So I don't have to have that in there. Now, there's one thing I should do, which it doesn't do automatically, and that is to go up there where the little green box is, where it says tag, and I click on that, and what this does is it tells me which basic facts about the person are covered in this source. Well, it's a death certificate, so his name's there, gender's there, birth's there, death's there, and burial is there. So I'm going to click on all those things and then click close, and I can forget about it. And when they create the source, they will tag this source to all those vital events. And so it's a real nice way to make people see, without having to go to the list of sources and guess. They can actually go like to death and see what sources have been tagged to that person's death. And they'll be right there in a nice little list. So that's one thing I got to remember to do here, or I get carried away. I can always do it later, but it's nicer to do it right now. Once I've done that and closed that little box, then I click next, and I come up to a page where the top half of the page is all these boxes where I can fill in search things to search for this person. I don't really want to do that. It takes time. You might get the wrong one if there's more than one of him in tree. And so all I want to do is paste that ID number that I copied way back at the beginning in this great big box. We're going to put those little 7 characters and then say next. And then we get a box where it says, okay, we're going to attach this to Thomas Elwood Sands, make sure it's going to the right person, and then give them a reason. I'm saying this is his death certificate that verifies his birth and death information that was previously known. And then I'll click create and attach, and there it is. There's my source for him. The only thing they didn't do was the date. And so I would have to click edit, and then the date will be up there and it'll be empty, and I can fill a date in there. In this case, I would want to put 1910 for the year that he died. But that's a real nice feature. And it works a lot better when it works in Chrome if you're a Chrome user. But I know we now know at least we can go over and use Firefox, use it for a little bit to use it to make the sources with record seek, and we're in business. Okay, so we'll leave that. We'll leave the making of sources a little bit, and we'll just talk about some other things. Let's see. Please attach all record hints. When you see record hints attached to a person, please attach all of them to the person as a source, even if they might appear to be duplicates at first glance. Don't mark them as not a match. If you look at each hint carefully, you'll usually discover there's minor differences between them. The reason for duplicates are a multitude. The record might have been indexed more than once. The event appears in more than one collection, like a marriage record might appear in a county marriage record, in a state marriage collection. It might have been published in the New England Historic and Genealogical Register. And so there could be a multitude of copies of this wet marriage floating around. A record could have been filmed more than once. It could actually be on a couple of different films. That happens a lot of times. And the collection itself might contain a duplicate record. There might be 2 of the same record in there. So there's many ways to have duplicates. And so what do you do about a duplicate hint? Well, look at the URLs on the hints. Each one should have a different and unique URL. They usually have a little section that kind of looks like a person's ID, and those will change for every source. So if you look for just that one part, you'll be able to tell if they're the same exact record or two different records. If the parent duplicate has a unique URL, but it isn't about the person that it's saying it's supposed to go to, that you mark as not a match. The key thing there is it's about a person other than the person they're saying it belongs to. If it really belongs to somebody else, do mark that not a match. If that apparent duplicate has a unique URL and is about the person, then click review and attach it. It's okay to have more than one record for the same event. And if you dismiss that duplicate, what's going to happen is the system then is going to have logged in, well, this name doesn't go to this person, and this marriage date doesn't go to this person, and this spouse doesn't go to that person because you've marked them not a match. And then it messes up the whole program for helping you find records for that person. That's why you don't want to mark a record that really belongs to a person as not a match, because then it becomes very hard for the system to provide you with future hints. Now, if the apparent duplicate really has the exact same URL as another record for that person, then contact FamilySearch and let them resolve the issue. So the only time you're going to mark not a match is if you find a hint and it's not really for this person. And that can happen. Okay, duplicate records and sources. Here's an example. 5 marriage sources for William Andrews and Margaret Woodward. And they only got married once. So, these come from different record groups, and apparently there's even duplicates within the groups. And so we just attach them all, because what we want to do is avoid duplication in tree. If you attach them all to Margaret and William, then those sources can't be used to create a new Margaret and William somewhere in tree and start a duplicate situation. We're trying to avoid that from happening. So we're going to merge them all together, and then someday FamilySearch is going to work out a system where they're going to physically be able to merge the FamilySearch sources that are alike like this into one master source that covers all of them. They're working on that. It's going to take some time. I might mention one other thing I didn't put in here, which could be a little bit controversial. Let's say census records. We know FamilySearch has all the census records. Sometimes it's a little easier to find them at Ancestry, let's say, or it could be that nobody's looked for them in FamilySearch, but you can easily find them over there in the hints at Ancestry. If you attach something like a 1930 census from Ancestry to a person, and somebody else comes along and attaches the 1930 census from FamilySearch, it's perfectly logical and clear and okay for anybody to go in and delete that Ancestry source for the 1930 census, because it truly is a duplicate. We know if it's talking about the same family, it's a duplicate record. And we aren't worried about preserving the hints from other sources as much as we are about preserving our FamilySearch sources. You wouldn't delete the FamilySearch one and keep the Ancestry. In that case, you'd get rid of the Ancestry one and keep FamilySearch. Okay. Now, hints. What are record hints? Hints are FamilySearch's attempt to help make life easier for us. They've gone through all their records, and they continue to go through those records all the time, looking for records that haven't been attached to people that appear to be your people. And if there's a very high quality of a match, they will call it a hint and show it to you. By high quality, I mean they make it to where it almost has to be your person, but it might not. There's always that slim chance that it isn't a record for your person. So you do have to be a little bit critical, but 99% of the time, that record hint is your person. And so they're just trying to help you to do the sourcing of those easy to find hints, because they know that there are millions and millions and millions of records out there that still need to be brought into tree. And a lot of people in tree that don't have hints or have very few. And so they're just trying to help us to build the source record for people. And of course, as doing this, it eliminates opportunities for people to create duplicates. Okay, so why attach hints? Sometimes they will provide us with extra relationships. We'll find new people. New people means people we can do in the temple often. They will provide us with additional events and facts about our person. More correct dates, hopefully. Maybe name variations and more complete place names. All kinds of things that we can get from sources that are marked as record hints. And you see an example over here. Anytime you see the little blue circles, you know those are record hints. And this is found on the home page in the right-hand corner of the home page, right-hand column, in a little box called Temple and Record Hints. Okay, so where can these be found? That was one of them. You can find these record hints listed on the person page under Research Helps. That's in the upper right-hand column on a person's person page. Or as you just saw on the previous slide, on the home page under Temple and Record Hints, again in the right-hand column, in a nice little box. When you're viewing sources that have been attached to people, underneath them, sometimes they'll show similar records. Well, those often will have record hints listed there. And then this is a picture from the helper resources. And you go up to the question mark in the upper right corner and then click on helper resources. Then you go to Discovery Ideas, and under Discovery Ideas, click on Hints. And this is a cool page because nowhere else in FamilySearch do they kind of divide up the hints for people in your tree, and they'll say, okay, here's some hints that are just additional sources. Here are some hints down here that might add some new people. Okay, and I used one of those. This first one is one of our examples tonight. And then there's another group for adding events. They won't add new people to these people, but they might add a death date, a marriage date, a burial, or whatever. They'll add events to those people. So there's several places where you can find these hints. Okay, so how do we process them? So here's a page for Elias Walters. This is his person page. And up in this corner are Research Helps. And there's a hint here that I clicked on. And it pops up way over on the right-hand side. And I know you can't read it, just look at the big boxes. What turns out is that even though this is a hint for Elias Walters, it's really about his son, Charles. Charles is his last child down there, the very bottom. It provides more complete birth and death data on Charles, because this is Charles' death record. It names Charles's parents, which verify Elias and his wife as they're his parents. And it adds his wife. So this is a really good source on Charles, but indirectly it ties to Elias because he's in there as one of the parents. And so this has some good data. And so, this appears to be accurate and represent our person because he has a child named Charles. So we're going to click Review and Attach down at the bottom off the screen and actually attach the source. And to use that, we have to use our little tool called Source Linker. And that sometimes is a tricky little device to use. And so I picked two examples to do tonight, and then we'll be done. And they're both sources where we have to do some rearranging and changing of things. Okay, the data might need to be manually added to tree, and we'll talk about that. And we'll see some people being added into tree from these sources. Okay, so I've clicked to Review and Attach for this source, and this is what comes up. Right away, there's a problem because I've got Laura here, and Laura's not anywhere attached to her husband, Charles, so there's no way I can link them together. And that's because there's multiple generations in this record. It's got the parents, it's got children, spouses, and things like that. And so what I need to do is change things around a little. There's that blue bar across the top, and directly below that blue bar is what we call the focus person, the person who we ought to focus on because this record is mainly about that person. Well, this person is not Elias Walters, who's there right now in that position. This record is really about Charles. And so what I want to do is click on Charles and move him up there where Elias is. And in doing that, it's going to then start sorting things around and make it to where I'll be able to handle Laura, along with attaching the source to Elias and his wife. So I've clicked and changed it. Charles is now found immediately below the blue bar, and his wife is right next to him where she should be because she's his wife. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is click on Compare on Charles. And we're going to see what shows up. When I click on there, you notice this source will replace the word death with a death date. It'll add a burial date. It'll add a residency. But there's a couple of things it's not going to do. We need to take some notes sometimes. Charles has a middle initial, W, which may or may not be accurate, but according to this source, it is. I won't be able to automatically put that into his name, so I'm going to have to take a note to add this in manually later. In his record in FamilySearch, it just says he's born in 1863 in Ohio. I've now got his full birth date, and I know that where he's born in Ohio, in Weston, Hancock County. And so I can't have that brought over either because it's already got some values there. I'm going to have to type it in manually later. So I have to be a little bit careful when I'm going through this step to make sure I don't miss anything that has to be manually added, and make sure I click the Replace, Add, and Add so that those values get put into his record at FamilySearch. This is what's on the source, and this is what's in his record. If I don't bring these things over, they won't be added to his record. Then I need to provide a reason for why I'm doing this, and then click Attach. And he's done, but only he's done at this point. So now we need to do his wife. Also, by the way, you'll notice that the system was automatically tagging in this death record his name, his birth, his sex, his death, and his burial. So it's making it this source go to all those facts on him. Okay, adding his wife. I've gone and added his mom and dad to this record. That's why they're green. Charles is green. That means he's been added. I clicked add on his wife, and up came a little card. I have two options at this point. Usually it'll just be a bunch of information from the source, and it'll let me create a new person. Or in this case, it's going to say there's a little card here. Hey, there's a Laura B. Walters married to Charles W. Walters that might be your person. Is this her? And so I have the choice of deciding whether I want to use that information and just attach this record to her, which means there's a duplicate for Charles. This duplicate ends in LPK, and Charles, my Charles, ends in KW3. So there's a duplicate of Charles out there. I'm pretty sure that's her. I mean, how many Laura B. Walters are married to Charles W. Walters? You know, so in this case, that record is a good duplicate. So I'm going to click select, and that's going to put the duplicate in that line. And then I'm going to have two Charleses that I'm going to need to merge together because he's already in a marriage with her somewhere else in tree, probably on her side of the family. When I'm done, Charles now has a pretty full record for his information. I don't have a christening, but I've got full birth, death, and burial information. And his family, when I merged the two Charleses together, it turns out that that other person had already put in 4 children. So now I have Charles with a wife and 4 children. And this all came about because I found a source for his father in this case. It was attached to his father. And so I was able to add a whole lot just from that one record. So, I mean, the people, the 4 children are already in tree, but there's always a good option that they are needing temple work. And what I've done, if nothing else, is I've helped clean up tree and avoid having duplicates floating around. Okay. So now let's look at one that's even worse. If you thought this was complex. My 3rd great-grandfather, John Beck, went through wives. I don't know, he must have been a tough guy to live with. He married my 3rd great-grandmother, Mary Catherine Nail, and had all these children, and then she died in 1864. In 1867, John married Phoebe J. Bassard. This all came about because I saw in my list of people listed as sources that there was a chance to add some people with a certain source that was attached to, it was supposed to be attached to Phoebe. So anyway, Phoebe marries him in 1867 and she dies in 73 after having 3 children by John. Then after she dies, John marries a Leah Jane Claybaugh in 1877, and she was his wife when he died in 1900. Now, so remember, Claybaugh is his last wife. They had no children because he was like 51 years old or so, 48 years old when they got married. So, you know, they were getting past the age of having kids. Now, BBJ, which is probably Jane, just like the next wife is Jane. She was married previously to John, to an Elias Walters, and had 3 children by him that we know of. And then he died in 1863. And so when they remarried, they were both widow and widower with children. So they had a blended family. So this record hint for Jane Beck is an 1870 census, where at this time she's the widow of Elias Walters and the current wife of John Beck. Well, as you can see, we're going to have a mess because we're going to probably have kids from 2 different families there. So when we click on that hint and it goes to record search, we get a real mess. And so it's showing Beck children here from the first marriage. It's showing Beck children from her marriage to John, because these were in the home at the time. And then it's showing the Walters children, which were John's stepchildren. And it shows Jane attached to somebody, but not to Phoebe J. Bassard, at least the Phoebe J. Bassard that I know, who had married Elias Walters and then married John Beck. So the first thing we're going to need to do is address this problem with that attachment. And the reason I'm going to say it needs to be detached is because you'll see that the attachment that was made here was made to somebody in tree, and it wasn't a Phoebe J. Bassard. It was actually to the third wife. And then once we do that, these names will start falling into a better position, and we'll be able to see what's going on with them. And we'll be able to get to the point where we can actually attach the Walters kids. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is detach the Jane Beck link. You see, when I click on it, it says it's attached to Leah Jane Claybaugh. That's why we need to get it out of there, because it's not Leah Jane Claybaugh it needs to go to Phoebe J. Bassard. So I actually have to do a detach and break that link that somebody else had done inadvertently. And I have to give a reason when I click to detach. So I say this link goes to Phoebe J. Bassard, not Leah Jane Claybaugh. And I click detach. And then I reattached it, this time to Phoebe Jane or J. Bassard. And as soon as I did that, everything lined up. Phoebe's here with the Jane Beck. I can connect the 1870 census to her, click attach. Elias shows right there below her as her husband. And then the children are down off the screen. I'm going to have to bring them up, drag them up, and drop them one by one, because the 1870 census does not give relationships. We have to line the people up, but we'll be able to now that I can connect Jane with Elias. And then later on, if I want to, I can connect Jane to the Beck and get the Beck children that she had with them. So anyway, I brought the children up, and it appears that the first child was already attached to somebody. So there's a duplicate this time, a real duplicate of William Henry Walters. 2 kids might be added because there's 2 children on this census that aren't in FamilySearch. And they appear to be her children by Elias Walters. Okay, and we talked about William. He's a probable duplicate there. So I have to merge them. Once they're merged, you see the record is attached already. Now I can come down here and I can start working on Martha. So I click add, and this time it says, FamilySearch says, we don't think there's a Martha Walters in there. So I can go ahead and create a new person for her. And then I can attach the next 2 children because they're already showing. All I need to do is compare. And then the last child, Charles, I'll be able to add into tree if he doesn't have a duplicate, and he doesn't. So that when I'm done, I've got Elias Walters with Phoebe J. Bassard and 5 children. So the family's grown by 2 new children. Everybody is sourced by the 1870 census. So it's really not hard. You just have to learn to move the people around. So that is sourcing. I didn't do a lot on the actual attaching of sources because I figured that's something you need to work on and learn by